We are really privileged to have Dr. Rajesh Tandon. And before I invite him to speak, I would like to, he doesn't need an introduction, but I would still try to give a brief uh, intro about Dr. Rajesh Tandon. Dr. Rajesh Tandon is an internationally acclaimed leader and a practitioner of Kriya, which is known as the president, the participated research in Asia, right? And it's a global center which was established since 1982. He's also the co-chair of UNESCO Chair in Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education since 2012. Dr. Tandon also heads the Forum for Indian Development Corporation as its chairperson. He is chairperson of the committee to carry out appraisal of the scheme Unnat Bharat Abhiyan and member of expert group for development of educational framework for global citizenship in higher education institutes constituted by the UGC. Dr. Tandon is an engineering graduate from IIT Kanpur and has done his MBA from IIM Kolkata and has done his PhD in management from Case Western Reserve University, USA. Dr. Tandon left his academic um, job at IIM to support and champion the cause of building organizations and capacities of the marginalized through their knowledge and learning empowerment. Dr. Tandon won many national and international awards. He is the first Indian to be inducted to the International Adult and Continuing Education Hall of Fame class of 2011. He is also the first Indian scholar to be inducted in the Academic of Engagement Scholarship in 2019. We're so privileged, Dr. Tandon, once again, and thanks for accepting to be over here. And over to you, Dr. Tandon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rao, and thank you, colleagues. You can hear me clearly? Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am really delighted to be here with you today. And of course, the presentation made by Swati is illustrative of the excellent work that CII Telangana unit is doing, not just during the COVID, but for many, many years. As you heard in my introduction, I was reasonably happy as a lecturer at IIM Calcutta. But when I went to do my PhD in US, I decided to do field work in India. And I went to rural areas of southern Rajasthan to understand how development programs of the government were functioning and how benefits were reaching the mostly tribal communities there. And I found that two unbelievable experiences. The one, and that was of course more than 40 years ago, one that given my educational qualification, I thought that I knew everything. IIT, MBA, this, that, and the other. But I realized that the struggle by which these rural communities were making their lives with dignity, despite lots of scarcity, they had enormous competence. But I didn't know many things about how to lead a life like that, despite my formal education. The second thing I learned, which I want to share with you because of the theme of this inaugural session, building responsible organizations, I discovered that an anomaly in the Indian context, which I had not thought about before. India is a highly stratified society, as you know, and that those stratifications continue, and we have a ranking order from the top to the bottom. The totem pole may change from now and then, but we are a very stratified society, even today. But we are a very under-organized society. And what I mean by under-organized society is that a lot of our social and economic activity continues to be done in an informal way, not really properly organized. The largest system of organization in the country is that in the government at national, provincial, and local level, but also corporate sector is highly organized. And I think there is a emerging to be in many of our development initiatives a recognition that communities need to get organized. And in order to get organized, they need to be able to come together with a shared interest. And this is essential because those who are excluded, marginalized, sometimes we tend to put the blame on them. We tend to say, look at me, I am struggling, I am studying, I am completing my education, my children are doing so, but why are you not doing? And we tend to forget that they are subjected to some longer periods of structural inequalities and exclusions. And in order to overcome that, they need to learn. Communities and individuals and households from such segments of our society need to learn. Learn new habits, learn new skills, learn new ways of acting in a modern society. But in order to learn something new, as we all know, they have to unlearn old behaviors. So, as the recent survey, family health survey shows, and Swati explained, so many toilets have been built, but still only 75% of them are being used. So, by building a toilet, learning does not happen unless efforts are made to support that learning. And in order for the really poor and the vulnerable individuals and families to be able to learn, they need to do it together. We call it developing individual and collective agency. It is that agency which encourages all of us to take responsibility for our lives, to improve our lives, to take advantage of the opportunities that come by from which we can benefit. So now, in order to support this, we are finding that some of the government programs and several industry programs are trying to support building organizations of women, organizations of farmers, organizations of youth. And I would like to recommend to you in the CSR community that you may consider how your own investments can build organizations. I like Mr. Venkatraman's comment in his opening remarks that one of the competencies of the corporate sector is capacity to organize. And I invoke that capacity now to support organizations. So, claiming of benefits, to be able to hold each other accountable, we need organized, systematic way of functioning, even in the most poor and vulnerable sections of our society. So there is a need for making effort in building, supporting, strengthening organizations of women, of youth, of farmers, of marginal farmers, this such that they can take responsibility for their development. The second example that I want to narrate to you is something I learned way back in management education, that when investment comes to a new area, there is a gestation period before it begins to work. And if you take investment in any project which requires use of any natural resource or human resource, there is always a gestation period. I remember when we went to IIT Kanpur in the early days, Padampat Singhania was the chairperson of the board, and he mentioned that the JK Industries based in Kanpur offered to Jawaharlal Nehru, the late Prime Minister of India, enormous amount of land to locate Indian Institute of Technology Kanpur. And he said that I am doing it not because JK Industries will employ all of you, but because developing a human resource base is important for the regional development of this area. And it is that context, you know it better than me, that Hyderabad and its surrounding areas, and to that extent, Telangana, has been fortunate to be able to have that kind of a human resource development. But when it comes to natural resources, it is important to recognize that in a country so densely populated as ours, any piece of land is not vacant. Those of you who are investing in solar energy may have realized by now that the amount of land you need to put solar panels in order to generate 100 megawatt may actually result in displacement of many hundred or thousand families. That unfortunately has been a history of economic development in our country. It is not that the families displaced do not understand that this is needed for the larger public good. But what they don't appreciate is that they don't benefit any out of it. And that has been the history of our tribal population. That has been the history of a lot of our rural population. And increasingly, modernization of our large metros is also causing similar displacement. But when you have a gestation period, 7, 8 years for many industries, why don't we start talking to the communities who are likely to be adversely affected right from the beginning? I have found on most occasions that talking begins to happen only when the bulldozers have arrived. We tend to forget that people don't live in informational vacuum. Either industry leaders and project managers provide authentic, direct information to these communities themselves, or some other intermediaries will provide misinformation and disinformation. And so when the bulldozers arrive, it doesn't matter whether the enterprise is led by the Tatas or not. It causes violence. It creates a larger problematic of a narrative about private business, the narrative of mistrust. It's now nearly 3 decades since 1991 that we have adopted a model that private business will be an important pillar of economic development, but that model needs to be accepted. It needs to be seen as a part of society and not apart from it. And this is where the social positioning of private business, particularly large corporate business, becomes very important. And therefore, it is not a matter of merely undertaking CSR programs. I think those programs are doing very well. I think those programs may want to look at what will happen to those cylinders of oxygen 3 years from now. How will they be maintained? How will they be looked after? And how will those public health systems where these oxygen cylinders neatly placed today will be held to behave like responsible organizations, accountable to the mandates that they have been provided, and having the capacity to implement that mandate. This brings me to the larger question of supporting the notion of corporate citizenship. I'm so glad to hear some of you refer to it as well. We want private business, national and state and local governments, and initiatives of the communities on their own, with help from private business, with support from civil society, with resourcing from government schemes, all of us to behave in a responsible and sustainable manner. And it is in that direction that I hope the industry leaders, not just in CII Telangana, but CII as a whole would look forward in the next decade. Because sustainability is not just a question of doing business in a new way. Sustainability is also building capacities and institutions which are normative, which follow their systems, and which fulfill their mandates, starting from the organizations of the rural poor women and marginal farmers on the ground. A better organized, more systematically organized, a more complex set of organizations working in tandem will make our social and economic progress sustainable, both ecologically and socially. And towards that end, it is important that our corporate leaders take initiative on a long horizon such that short-term CSR investments remain sustainable over the long haul. Let us not forget that despite phenomenal economic growth in the country since the turn of the millennium, India's position on Human Development Index of the UNDP remains more or less stagnant around 130 among 190 countries top. That huge economic and social inequality can only be addressed when we work in partnership with those who are both better off and those who have been left behind. The Sustainable Development Goals say, let no one be left behind, and we periodically mouth that. But I think we need to take a good look at how, as corporate citizens, we engage with other actors in our society such that an increased social trust in each other in different institutions is nurtured, because that trust is foundational for social capital, which is essential for bringing better returns on financial capital. I thank you for inviting me and hope to work with some of you in the future to take our shared dream of a strong, inclusive, and well-being India forward. Namaskar. Thank you.